wanted to give a shout out to Ray. I know he's not here, but he was very consistent, very persistent. A lot of back and forth to really make this event happen. So shout out to Ray. But we'll really quickly do some intros and then we'll jump straight into the serious questions. But I am Stephanie. Very nice to meet you all. I lead the university recruiting at Sentry. I get to plan really cool events like this, meet amazing students like you all, convince you guys to come work with us, but also try not to scare you guys all away as well in the process. But that's a little bit about myself. I'd love for you to also hear about my team who are here tonight. You guys want to come up and introduce yourselves?
Yeah, my name is Richard. I'm a senior software engineer at Sentry. I've been at the company for over 3.5 years now. Also did an internship from while I was in college. Graduated from UC Berkeley, double major in computer science and data science, and I currently work on our issues team. So if you ever use Sentry, basically everything related to our error monitoring product is what my team deals with. Full stack engineer on the team, so happy to answer any questions later. Anything you have about Sentry, about engineering, about what I do, anything like that.
Woo! My name is Rachel. I'm an engineer on the back-end infrastructure team. Like Richard, I also went to Berkeley and then Cornell later on. Been at Sentry for 2 years. It's a great place to be. Let me know if you guys have any more questions after the event.
David Kramer. I started Sentry a long time ago. I do a lot of things. I'm a software engineer by trade. I don't know, we'll get into more stuff later. So that's just who I am. But, and then we're
Okay.
I'm out of it.
Yes. Okay. So now we have some questions for the engineers. So we're going to go through and ask those around. All right. First off, what does your day-to-day actually look like now versus when you first started Sentry? Feel like engineer versus founder must be pretty different now? For us.
Not for Kramer probably more
Yeah.
than me.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want the answer of what does my day-to-day look like right now, I think we have a lot of time to actually do coding at Sentry. I think that's one of the really cool things about the job. There's some planning that goes on, some tech specs and all that kind of stuff. As you kind of get more senior, you get roped into more, mentorship roles, doing one-on-ones with other people on the team, helping out with interviews and things like that. But I'd say like a solid 70–75% of my time each week is just unscheduled, dedicated time where I can do coding work or anything else that might come up.
Yeah, so when I started out at Sentry, a lot of the work is kind of like requirements already being handed to you, and you basically think of like how to implement it, and you go about implementing it. And now, like with more experience, I get looped into a lot of like decision making and a lot of like earlier conversations. My team basically services a lot of the asks from the entire company, like from all the different product teams, such as the issues team. And basically we have to talk to them about like why they want to do what they want to do and how to like support their use cases. So nowadays, like my days, a lot of it revolves around in like those earlier conversations and design.
Oh yeah, go for it.
I can sing.
There are 3 chairs there, so
Make it less
Feel
awkward.
free, yeah.
I refuse.
We all.
I could just-
I'll get it out.
Too cringe. I learned this week that Indiana is on the East Coast, which is a little confusing, but
Not the East Coast.
I agree.
Eastern time zone, that means East Coast.
I don't think the East Coast claims Indiana.
That's probably true.
Yeah.
Good. What's something you learned in your first few years as an engineer that you wish more students actually focused on earlier?
merging is not the end of your problems. Sometimes that's the start of your problems. When I was in school, you've got grade scope. I don't know if you guys use grade scope, but like you get a score and you're like Gucci, you're done with the assignment, right? But like in the industry, like when you merge something, you have to think about like what are all the ways that it can mess up production and have plans to like basically cover yourself if things go wrong. There's also a lot of like quality measurements that you should have like before and after deploy to make sure that things improve, or at the very least don't get worse. So I think like having that like mentality of thinking about like a more deeper systematic way of thinking is helpful in school.
I think it's important to remember that like, yeah, you're coming out of college, you have a fancy computer science degree, you still know very, very little. And I think just recognizing that and acknowledging it early on is really important. I feel like I've seen a lot of people come in like thinking that they know everything, they're really, really smart, and they are really smart, they are good engineers, but they think they know more than they actually do, right? And kind of just taking a step back and acknowledging that there's so much that you don't know, and being open to that, open to being challenged, open to learning, I think is really important and something that helps a lot of you guys out.
Yeah, I think the biggest gap is usually you just don't know what you don't know. Like, I did not do the college thing, but I'm a big fan of co-op programs in schools because you really don't experience, you can't experience anything doing like classwork, and until you have like customers and users on your, whatever you're shipping, it's like an academic exercise, and as soon as you have customers, like just things go wrong, and you just gotta figure things out, and you just, I don't know, everything's like, most learning, for me, and I think a lot of other people in the industry is like, learn by doing. There's also, I think, why it's important, like the kinds of companies you join and whatnot. And I just think like most people, unless they've spent lots of time at like one of these program programs where they have an internship every quarter or something, it's very different than what you think about a lot of times. But I think fortunately when you're young, you're more willing to put up with shit. You'll find now that like you hire like a 40-year-old engineer, and they're like, I'm done at 5 o'clock. And when you're young, you don't really think about that. But the problem is like lots of things go wrong at lots of random times as soon as like you hit reality. And I don't know, like I was always like the person that I just like building software. And so I never thought about this, but I think about this a lot now. Because like something will interrupt my evening or something. I'm like, oh yeah, that's like still the job. Just like shit happens. Customers in the world is unpredictable. I think that feels like it becomes increasingly true as time goes on. Where there's more and more events you don't control. But I think the main thing is just like, I think it's similar to what Richard said, is like you just, things on paper do not work at all like they do in real life. A lot of what you get out of academics just doesn't actually necessarily apply, and more importantly, a lot of what academics teaches you doesn't actually prepare you for what like most of software engineering is. At least in I would say our field. There's probably some where it's less true, but the majority of the technology ecosystem is just wildly different than academic.
Thank you. Realistically, how much should we be worrying about AI taking entry-level suite jobs? What kind of roles or skills do you think stick around?
I've never been on a recruiting trip for Sentry, so if that is not a signal that I think everybody's safe, I don't know what could be. I'm curious your perspective.
I mean, I think that there's like so much like, you know, news and all the sensational media and stuff like that. Like you have to understand where that's coming from. Like these people are trying to sell you something, right? Jensen Huang goes on TV and he's like, oh, I think, what is it? Every engineer should have half their salary in tokens or something like that. Why do you think he's saying that? He wants to sell shit, right? Like NVIDIA is making a massive amount of money right now selling people that kind of stuff. The more tokens they use, the more money he's making. I think you have these people that don't really know what they're talking about. You know, I don't know.
I think they don't think about what their words are.
They don't think about what their words are and the impact of it. And that creates this cycle where the news reports on it, more people think this kind of stuff, more people start thinking it because they think another smart person's thinking it. And that just has these consequences, this rippling effect where suddenly all these companies are slashing hiring for new grad roles. And like, I don't know where they think senior engineers come from, but they don't grow on plants. Like, you have to train them, right? You have to take someone in who's, you know, I joined Sentry as a new grad. I'm a senior engineer now. That took 3.5 years to happen. right? If you're not making that investment now, in 3, 4, 5 years, you're in trouble. I think AI is really, really good at kind of being a multiplier. It's really good at kind of helping you out at the things you're good at. If you're a really good engineer, you can definitely find really effective ways to use it. If you're not so good of an engineer, it can have a super detrimental effect as well, right? You can just create a bunch of slop and add it to your code base. So I think if you're good, the skills that kind of made a good engineer good in the past, I think are relevant. Learn how to use these tools. But I think all this stuff about it's going to replace everyone in the next couple of years is a bunch of nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, have you guys seen how Claude hallucinates and says like the wrong answer so confidently, and you kind of have to like doubt it, and when you doubt it, it starts like folding on itself, like three prompts in. Like Richard said, like AI, like it's more like a tool that like multiplies what you're already good at. It's very good at definitive tasks, like things that you like define very well, and it'll just do like more of like the I don't want to say like mechanical, but like tasks that are less design heavy are the ones that I find it more good at in my day-to-day life. So I feel like that is like harder to replace with AI. Like you still have to get good at these things yourself. So I don't think AI is really going to replace us in like the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, the analogy I always use for people is, well, first off, everybody's got to say, don't worry about that. Everybody I know that's running companies and engineering organizations is hiring just as many people as ever, and everything you read on the news about like layoffs is just normal, like business as usual. It's two things. It's one, they hired a lot and they did not prune the org because everybody hires ahead, and so at some point they got to fix that when the numbers don't match up, and then it's being compounded a little bit because everybody's overspending on AI infrastructure, especially the biggest companies, and the money has to come from somewhere, and they would prefer it not come from executive salaries and all this other thing. But there's not like, the industry is not slowed down on hiring, at least not relative to like from AI or anything like this. And I think the second part is like, all the skills are still the same. And so I always articulate this, like you can't use a calculator if you don't know math. You can't, like LLMs, I'm sure some of you, I don't know how the courses work at schools, but I'm sure there's some courses that teach you about like markup chains and things like this, like the fundamentals. But the way I always reason about it to people is like, it will not produce anything unless you give it the answer. So unless you tell it exactly what the correct answer is, it's not going to give you the correct answer back. And that's just like fundamentally how the technology works. And so I think for like the busy work tasks, like copy paste basically. It's good at copy paste. It's good at like analysis and stuff. It is not good at writing code or generating code or whatever you want to call it. It's not good at designing systems. It's actually not good at most things, I would say, without heavy-handed control. And I'm sure some of you use it. And definitely use the technology because you do need to learn it. It will be. It is effectively, this year is the year that LLMs. I don't know about for new grads, but at least for like normal engineers, like engineers that are already in the industry, there will be an expectation from companies like ours that you know how to use the tools. And so I think don't compromise the basics for that, because the basics are always important. But there is a time you need to do that, and there's probably an advantage you get if you have strong fundamentals and you know the tool chain. That's certainly more valuable to folks, but we don't actually evaluate anybody yet on it. And I assume we might do something later this year, but I doubt we will for new grads.
I have a question, like for your like computer science classes, what's the policy about using tools like that? Just strictly for written?
Usually like all of that, you know,
In my intro to CS class, I believe we can use it if we're looking at specific errors. We can copy the errors into the LLM and have it explained to us.
I heard one person talking to me today about like a class where like for like the homework assignments, like one of the problems, like parts of the problem, we can use like AI to like solve it or something. I was a little confused.
It's not like, yeah, it's not like optional, it's required.
It's required.
And
Yeah.
in my, there's a program at Purdue called the Data Mine, which is like a data science 1 credit hour class. And you're completely allowed to use AI on it. You just can't copy and paste it. You have to make some meaningful changes, and you have to document what you used it.
Because it's interesting what you can do with it, and it's very useful, a lot like the mechanical work and stuff, but I think the risk is it's potentially bad for learning.
It's terrible for
It just makes you lazier.
so bad
Yeah.
for learning. That's one thing I was just about to warn people about. Was like when I was in college, I was a TA for over 3 years, and you know when you're teaching a course, you can really see which students fundamentally understand the material and which ones don't understand the material, which ones kind of skim the textbook and are trying to pass the test that way. I've seen a lot of people kind of start jobs in the last year and a half and they try to just use LLMs to help them learn all this material, right, to onboard. And I think that's a fundamental mistake. I think when you kind of skip out on the basics and try to fast forward a little bit, you're really setting yourself up for disaster, right? If you don't have that fundamental knowledge and you're trying to build off of it, you're screwed, right? So really spend that time early on understanding the basics, right? Whether it's a skill, whether it's a technique, whether it's kind of a system. Understand that. Yes, you can use the LLM to help you a little bit, but if you kind of totally delegate the learning to the machine, to the agent, and just try to consume the text it's spitting back at you, even like Claude has like those learning modes or whatever, I find this to be kind of useless. Like really, really hold yourself to a high bar of understanding the basics before you try to move on to anything else.
Okay, when did Sentry go from a side project to a thing that can be an actual company?
So Sentry, I just turned 40 years old. I don't know if I look old or not, but I would consider myself old. I started Sentry early in my career. I don't remember how long ago, but I think we have this calendar thing that I think is in May. I think it's like 17 years is since I started the project. The Sentry is like this interesting thing where I would just do a lot of open source in it. Sentry, we do a lot of open source. Kind of the companies I worked at, there was no policy, we didn't care. It was startups, but generally I would just like put everything out there on GitHub, or it wasn't GitHub at the time, but everything was open source. Sentry was just one of these projects. Happened to be a useful project. I kept working on these because it turns out it's nice when you work on something that other people use it. It's like a good validation and satisfaction mechanism. Which is also why it's fun to work at companies where people know what the companies are. And I just kept working on it over the years, and then in 2012, I bootstrapped it into a cloud service, which is like just started letting people pay a subscription fee for not much money. And then 2015, we had a couple, we is like the royal we in this case. My co-founder is a product designer, and he helped me spin up the business side. But had like 2,000 customers, 600K in revenue, something like that. We were like profitable bootstrap business, profitable in the sense of like, once upon a time, Silicon Valley salaries were much less, and I could almost match my salary. But we were not profitable in the sense of like I was good at business and we were min-maxing the revenue or anything. And 2015, I went out and I fundraised. That's really when we started building the company. That's 10 years ago now. And that's when we started hiring a lot more engineering, and it grew pretty well. But yeah, so every version of Sentry is just, it's been around a long time. And I sort of at least view it as like a timeless problem, which is a great situation to be in, where there's I've had this for sure. There's like an anxiety in the industry right now where it's like, oh, what software is going to continue to exist and what's not. And then when you step back from the constant noise, you're like, okay, software is still software, it still works the same. The fundamentals of how you build software, what you need for software to run are still all the same. It just sort of grows. Like the industry grows, the technology grows. And when you think about things like, you have code that you're running in production or something, it's always going to have problems in some shape or form. Maybe hypothetically one day we eliminate errors. Seems unlikely in my lifetime. But we're not going to eliminate, I don't know, AWS going down or something like that. So there's still going to be problems you have to react to. And so it's always just been this ongoing thing of like, how do we continue to improve it and expand the market? And for us, at least, a lot of that market was like, I don't know if they do like what programming languages and stuff you deal with, but like obviously JavaScript's big in the world. I sort of was brought up in Python. That was a lot of my early career. Essentially still a lot of Python. But we started in that little bubble of like, oh, we have Python developers, and then we'd be like, we have JavaScript developers, and it's like Java and PHP and Ruby, and we just started building all this stuff that would support different programming languages and frameworks and stuff. Now, to the point where we basically support almost any runtime that exists out there, with the asterisk that we basically avoid embedded languages and stuff. But for example, like we're on the Xbox and PlayStation now, which
On the Switch too.
yeah, on the Switch too. Wildly different, by the way, than web software. And so there's always more, I guess. And our sort of model of the company, which has made this true, is we're not like a normal enterprise business. My fundamental goal is like, I wanted everybody to use our software because it's useful to all of engineering. So we're like, well, like, how do we make that possible? And so I think we're almost at like 200,000 customers, which is a fuzzy word that means like real businesses and hobbyists, but kind of like unique organizations or accounts on our cloud service, which is, that number probably doesn't mean a lot to you, but the way you should think about that is most companies in the industry use our software now, which for me, makes the job more interesting. Doesn't mean we make the most money, but it makes the job more interesting because all of our peers use our technology and stuff, so it's fun.
Awesome. So DevTools is a pretty crowded space. So how did you guys get initial traction without getting drowned out?
Yeah, I was talking to somebody about this earlier today, like how you get your first customers, and I'm like, good luck. It's, I mean, I was pretty well established in the industry. Like, I used to speak at a lot of technology conferences, so if you know what Django is, Sentry's built on top of Django. I've spoken at almost every, once upon an era, I spoke, like, keynoted almost every Django conference in the world. And so I had some public celebrity within that, and then that was also the time when Django itself was becoming really popular, or had already become really popular. And so a bunch of other companies were using it, like Instagram and Mozilla was at the time, Eventbrite. They all used Django. They all started using Sentry, and that kind of repeated for a while. So we just had like phenomenal product market fit out of the gate. And when you have that and you have some distribution, and distribution in this case was me. It was me out there accidentally marketing it. It just kind of grows. And so I always tell people, like, there's this great podcast called Acquired. If you ever have 4 hours to waste, that's how long an episode is. And it's really good, but what you learn in it is they tell a lot of stories about iconic companies. It's not all tech or anything. So you'll have like really fun one, listen to like LVMH, like Louis Vuitton or something. Like, I assume most of you are not into fashion, I don't give a shit about it, but the story is phenomenal. And all of the stories are like that, and what you find, and you learn this about like Bill Gates and these other characters, is like exceptional human beings, like very, very, very intelligent. Some kind of natural advantage, money, network, something, and then right time, right place. And all three of those are basically true for any like very like successful company. Sentry's not in this category, to be clear. We're much smaller, we're not those kinds of people, but you still have to have some degree of those truths going on. You have to have capable people, you have to have had like an opportunity that was there that you were able to take advantage of. And for Sentry in particular, I think when I fundraised, we got shitty terms. Like our valuation at seed was 6 million post, which that may not mean much to you, but that's 600K revenue. It's a 10x number on what doesn't even matter. Whereas now people will raise a 50 to 100 million seed with zero revenue. They never become businesses. And so the market's just like, you don't control that. And so some of this is right time, right place, but there was also no competition really to speak of that had a stronger advantage than we did. And so again, I don't want to say it's luck, because yeah, luck that this thing was there and worked and stuff, it's mostly a lot of hard work, and then you have a situation where the hard work will impact. And you can create those situations, and that's like the big thing. And so Sentry itself being a successful thing, I think, is a little bit lucky. But we're also not nearly as big as our biggest competitors. So, I mean, there's a long ways to go.
If you were back in college right now, trying to build something in infra/DevTools, where would you even start? What's not cooked yet?
It's all you. I skipped the college thing. I think everything is cooked.
Yeah, I mean,
Cooked is like done.
yes.
I don't quite understand lingo most days, but
I think the thing that I think is one of the most interesting fields right now that I haven't heard a lot of chatter about is like, there's been a lot of discussion about like code being written, and there's a bunch of really cheap ways to deploy that code. But I think this whole idea of like being on call as an engineer is something that over the next couple of years, I think it's really going to change. It's super annoying to be on call. Imagine 24/7, no matter where you are, your phone can go off because, like David was saying, like something could be going wrong, right? Like AWS is down, GCP is down, Cloudflare is having an incident, someone's messed something up. That impacts a lot of people, and it can happen at any time of the day, right? And as an on-call engineer, you kind of have to go and try to see what you can do to fix it. I think in this world of agents and all that kind of stuff, there's really somewhere where you can take advantage of some of the good things it's good at, contextualizing things, searching things, building up this kind of database of knowledge, and kind of connecting the dots between what's going on in your system and that kind of stuff. So I think over the next couple of years, we're probably going to see a little bit more in companies building out tools to make, responding to like system incidents, make that a little bit better, and just helping the life of an on-call engineer. I think that's a pretty interesting thing that I haven't heard too much about.
Yeah, what ideas do you think would exist that are not cooked?
AI on-call engineers is a good one. There's like a bunch of companies that are popping up doing that, a bunch of different ones. I was at Daytona and there was like a company there who's trying to use Sentry actually, and they're doing AI on-call engineers. But another interesting one that I think is AI agent, like AI agent observability. Like traditionally, like software monitoring, software errors are very loud errors, right? You get an HTTP request, it fails, you know it fails. It's like very deterministic. But with AI agents, like hallucination or like prompt regression, or like they just like use a bunch of tokens that for a very simple task, right? Those things that are less visible, and especially in production, right? Like you can guess some of that by how the user like interacts, like in their natural language. Like I don't know if you guys saw the tweet with like Claude having hard-coded like specific phrases and mapping that to like user sentiment. But that's just like an example of like agent monitoring that is like pretty interesting. Sentry is actually trying to like pivot or like add on more AI observability. I was just in a meeting this week on Wednesday before my flight about adding capabilities for our database to better support agent observability. So that's definitely a space I tap into.
I think there's this interesting, I think this is sort of Anthropic's way of thinking right now, because the thing you gotta be real about is none of the core problems of technology go away, for the most part. And so like data centers still valuable, weirdly more valuable now than they were recently. Usually that doesn't happen. Usually they plateau, but they stay a value. You don't want to go in those businesses. And so you shouldn't be thinking about that, because there's sort of this mentality that you very quickly learn, especially as a founder in like Silicon Valley, is like you need to be growth oriented. And the way I rationalize that is think about stories you hear about private equity versus venture capital. Private equity is squeeze more money out of the thing, like squeeze it death basically, like just min-max every turn. Growth is like take big risks, figure out what's to be, not like focus on the past. You don't ever want to be probably on the private equity side. And so when you think about that, like, well, okay, where's growth going to be? You kind of got to be a little bit forward looking. You can be crazy forward looking, which a lot of founders are, and you hear stories about some of these wild ideas, and they just, I don't know, WeWork kind of still exists, where they just completely go like to fucking imagination land of what they think people want or something, because like this is also the downside of Silicon Valley. But the big bets are just like things that people aren't really doing yet, or maybe not possible yet. And so you got to kind of think about that. And I would say like, I would not be thinking at all about any of this if I were you. Like you just don't have enough experience to make informed decisions about where technology could be going. And so you're just kind of like guessing. And then your problem is like, what's your competitive advantage over me? Or over somebody that's worked at Sentry if they go start a company, or anybody else that has, say, 5-10 years under their belt. It gets really, really hard. And so Sentry and many things I built in my career, even the half the things that work on for us at Sentry, are just things I think are interesting or valuable. Like, I built some of our random AI tools. I currently spend a lot of time building a fucking Slack bot for us.
What's the name of the stuff?
The Slack bot is called Junior. It's very useful. It's basically an agent that's plugged into a bunch of our stuff. And so now, instead of people asking other people questions, they ask the robot questions, and it's great. But I find these personally valuable. Sentry was one of those things that just came out of something that helped me do my job better. And so that's why I actually think there's always this risk of I know some people might want to be founders or entrepreneurs. I personally think it's a bad decision to do that straight out of school. I think really you should go work with some phenomenal teams. And this is not a Sentry pitch even, to be clear. You'll just see and experience so many more things, and then there's a lot of these, not advantages necessarily, but you lose a lot of disadvantages. And so an example, let's just say you somehow actually do have a great idea. Okay, how are you gonna get money to execute on the idea? How are you gonna hire people to help execute on that idea? Despite internet belief, you cannot run a company with one person and a bunch of AI. It's not a company that's real. And all that gets a lot easier when you've got a few years into your career. And it's not like 10, 20, you don't have to be like 30, 40 years old, but I do think it's really important to experience pain. Because like you see, I invest a bunch, and if you ever go to like YC, I'm assuming you've never been, but if you go to like a YC demo day, I'm not gonna lie, they look younger than the people in this room.
Looks like absolute children.
Yeah, it is like full of very, very young people, and it's very confusing. And they just haven't, it's kind of like throwing things at a wall and seeing what works, and it's not, works for YC, it's a good business model for them, but like, most people don't get anywhere, they don't succeed. It's not necessarily bad for them, and YC is a fine institution, it's just more, there's not enough experience for them to actually have like lived pain to understand what problems need solved, let alone to know how to solve that problem. Because like, take me, I always had a dream, I'm like, oh, it'd be fun to work in the music industry, and I'd be like, how do I take what I'm good at, and possibly turn that into value in the music industry, and I'm like, fuck if I know. It'd have to be Spotify, which is almost like anti-music industry. And think about that, like how do you go into a field where you don't have any experience or domain expertise? Because the most useful thing you can have is an opinion. And it's hard to have an opinion if you haven't lived any of it, What's also a nice thing about like infrastructure or developer tools is you're kind of building stuff that is catering to you, and so at least you can figure it out and figure out what does and doesn't work. Some consumer apps is the same thing, to be fair, but it just generally depends on your interest. And so my personal opinion there is like, go learn and experience some things before you sort of set your mind out on like, this is who I'm gonna be or what I wanna be. And just try to combine like what you like spending your time on with the thing that happens to pay you a lot of money.
Before we go on to another question, I feel like we've had a couple questions now, we've said a lot of stuff. Are there any like follow-ups, anything you guys want us to elaborate more on? Any questions you have for us before we move on to the next question?
I guess this is a question for everyone, but I know the nature of open source has kind of changed a lot in the last few years. I was wondering if you guys' philosophy has changed on it. I know a lot of, maybe not as enterprise level maintainers have had a lot of trouble maintaining stuff with AI, like kind of taking over. I was wondering what you guys' opinions on the future of open source are looking like.
Yeah, I guess Richard, you've been around, I think, long enough that you've probably seen a little bit of our transition. Yeah. So Sentry started as like liberal, like just BSD license open source, and if you're not familiar with open source, there's basically kind of do whatever you want, sort of do whatever you want, but you've got to like maintain some of my religion in there, and then you can't do shit. We don't believe in the middle category. We don't believe in sort of the free software. Fortunately, I dictate the beliefs of open source. I do not believe in sort of free software like the Richard Stallman stuff. I just don't care about it. Because any restriction on software, any constraint on how you can use it and what you must do with it is a restriction to me. And so things like GPL, which basically say, effectively, if you use this, anything that relies on this must be open source or something like that. That to me is a restriction on how I can use the software. So it just doesn't go well with me. So Sentry's always been progressive open source. So our policy now, we have a lot of that. And this is pre-AI, to be clear. And then we have this thing we call fair source, which is basically, it's called time-delayed open source. So Sentry itself, for example, whenever we publish a new change on GitHub, 2 years later, that change becomes Apache licensed and liberal open source. For the 2 years until that happens, you cannot use that code if you compete with us, if you commercialize that software, basically. I think post-AI, I don't know what happens. Big open source is still really important. Linux, big projects, little open source, so like, I don't know how much you do with like, sort of applied, but if you have like projects that maybe use like JavaScript, you install a lot of random dependencies of shit, right? I think a lot of that is gone. Because like, you can generate the sort of garbage code that is already in the dependency. Why take on the dependency in the first place? Because the code's not necessarily that good. You just don't want to like spend the time building it and maintaining it. But if the AI does just as good of a job and it's sort of customized to you, that's what you're going to do. And I actually think that's good. And that is not the core of open source for me either. I don't think that part actually mattered that much. But I don't know about the core of open source because there's also this complexity thing now where you can kind of, there's going to be some legal tests very soon of re-implementation of software using LLMs. And there's this complicated argument where all the big frontier models basically stole everybody's data to train them, and it's really hard to like undo that at this point. And because of that, they're able to basically, I forget what they call this, but like black box re-implement software in a lot of ways, which I don't think a judge is ever gonna be like, that's definitely illegal. But then there's people that'll just take the software and they'll use the LLM to rewrite it. That one is definitely not gonna fly. And so you see a lot of this because they might hate this license and they want to rewrite it to this or something like this. And I think they're just going to have a lot of challenges. Beyond that, I don't know. Open source has always been a fuzzy thing. But I think at least like licensing on software never stops mattering. You know, what's free, what's not how you can use it, things like that. I think it's all situational, but.
Any other questions? Any other follow-ups?
What's your current headcount and where do you see yourself going from here?
We're about 400 people. I only know this because I have to buy quad seats all the time now. And I have to add them by hand because otherwise they charge us up front and it's quite annoying. We're like 400 people. We have a lot of open headcount. We've never been the company that grows really, really fast in headcount, but we made this mistake and we slowed down quite drastically sort of around COVID, mostly because we didn't know what was gonna happen. And our business is not like a traditional enterprise business where you just add salespeople and we make more money. It's a really complicated, really long tail business. And so we don't wanna just burn all our capital. Unfortunately, we don't spend that much money, so we're safe, but we slowed down too much and now we're sort of ramping back up. I think our projection is in like 3 years we'll be like 600 people or something. Maybe it's 550, I don't remember exactly. So not like an insane number, but you don't really need that many people at a lot of companies. And I very much believe in like, you don't wanna hire people and let them go. Like nobody wants to do that. It's a fucking dumb way to run a business. You might grow slower if you don't do that. And so it's not necessarily the smartest way to financially run a business, but it's like, I don't know, more ethical way. But we're certainly not slowing down in hiring from our sort of curriculum, and most other people I don't think are either, as far as I can tell, so.
I think for reference, when I was an intern, if I remember correctly, it was summer 2021, we were about 160, 170 people. So in the last 4.5, 5 years, up to about 400 now.
Yeah.
Yeah, in my time at Sentry, we never did any of those like overhire and then lay off everyone that we accidentally overhired thing. Like when a lot of these companies are doing layoffs in industry, like I rest peacefully knowing that Sentry isn't gonna pull that off.
And I think that was like an important thing, right? It might have even been before you were at Sentry, Rachel, but like 2023, that was a really common thing, right? Like companies had hired a lot during COVID, during that 2021 era, and then they were laying everyone off. And that was like a really kind of scary time to be in the industry. A lot of my friends were either impacted by it, knew someone at their company that was impacted by it, right? We sent a lot of people to these big tech companies that were doing these layoffs. It was really scary, right? And I think the fact that we were able to kind of weather through that with very, very, very minimal impact, especially the engineering org, was I think a good, in hindsight maybe we slowed down a little bit too much, but in some ways it was a good thing.
Yeah, the complexity of slowing down is it's like a velocity thing. To catch back up takes a little bit, and that's kind of again where I'm like, based on what I hear, there's gonna be a lot more layoffs in the industry at some of the biggest companies, which isn't great. The industry's big, so it'll sort itself out, but there's still gonna be more of that. And I think it's especially gonna impact the companies where they are spending enormous amounts of money on GPUs and infrastructure for model. You can guess at which companies it might be, I guess is what I would say. And so think about that if you accept offers from certain very large companies or certain very boring companies like work. Don't go work.
Yeah, you guys talked a lot earlier about going to work with like a very extraordinary team before trying to start something. How would you guys suggest that we break into the industry now? Like, what would you guys be looking for when you hire, say, an intern or a new grad?
Yeah, you'll spend a lot more time on this than you said.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's, like, if you kind of think of it, like, it's almost like college admissions in some ways, right? Where, like, if you think about the numbers that we're doing, I think last year, maybe the year before that, we had like 45,000 applicants for our internship and new grad roles.
45,000?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Where's Stephanie? How much was it? Yeah, right? So 45,000 for interns and new grads.
Real people?
Yeah. That's for what, 10 internships and 20 new grad positions? What's the acceptance rate there? Less than Harvard, right? Like, obviously you can't review every single one of these resumes. But you kind of have to think about how do you stand out, right? Like, if you have, let's say every single person in this room applied, right? Every single person in this room went through roughly the same coursework, did roughly the same project, and probably got somewhat similar grades, right? An A versus an A minus versus a B plus, I don't think that really matters, right? What's different about, you people compared to everyone else who graduated from Purdue with a computer science degree? If your resume is just the schoolwork that you did, you're competing against every other single person from your school who did the exact same schoolwork, and from every other top university in the country that has a roughly similar computer science background. That's not gonna cut it, right? Doing something outside of school, which some people hate the idea of. I remember I went to school with a lot of people who were like, oh, why are these companies asking for like coding things I did outside of school? Outside of school is my free time. Like, I'm not doing coding outside of that. Like, you might have a harder time getting a job. Like, I'm sorry, but like that's the reality of it. Spending that time on developing those skills, trying to build something, learning these tools, right? Set yourself apart a little bit. I think that's like, especially with Claude Code and all this stuff, like it's really easy to experiment and just try things out. It doesn't have to be successful. We're not asking you to build, you know, $1 billion business or anything like that. But you do have to put some extra work into it, I think is the reality of it, which is, you know, you guys are still young. It's something you can just start doing, right? And learn how to stand out, right? Think again about when you were applying to colleges. Why did they choose you, right? How did you stand out from the crowd there? How do you stand out from the crowd that you're applying to?
I'd say that momentum is something that shows beyond the resume. Like we think of Sentry's culture, we love to have people who love building software, who thinks building software is fun, right? So when you have that passion for building software, like that will show through beyond your resume because you will spend your free time, you know, looking at different softwares to building software themselves. So like those are things that are important when we're evaluating candidates. We don't look for specific, you know, familiarity with a very specific framework, but we do look for like a passion to learn and a passion to grow.
Also, another piece of advice, if you think about the interviews you do with these people, right, the Sentry, I think, interview process, there's 3 or 4 interviews you have with another human. Like, I can't believe I have to say this, but like, don't be an asshole to your interviewer. Like, if you, like, this is the person that's deciding, right? Like, and even if it's a little bit of an implicit thing, like, it does make an impact on like, how well you communicate with them, how well you're able to talk with them. That kind of stuff is important. And I feel like it kind of gets overshadowed by the actual technical skills. But you know, your performance in these interviews, it's not just, do you remember how to solve this kind of problem? There's a lot of other stuff that goes on.
Yeah, when I evaluate candidates, I look for like, can you explain your thought process to me? Can you explain like a hard technical concept to me? Are you receptive to feedback? You know, if they start going off the side rails about the technical challenge I present to them, like I'll give them hints to get them back on track. Are they like receptive to it? Things like that.
Yeah, I think like, I rarely interview anybody, and it's usually an executive, so I'm far removed from this these days, but I used to do it a lot. What I care about is, sorry, I'm like operating on fumes right now. I care about potential of a person. Raw smarts aren't that useful, to be clear. Independently. I worked with a lot of exceptional people at Dropbox who were like the best people out of MIT, and they could not do that much from an engineering point of view. But what you want is somebody that's like curious, passionate, and like, here's how I think about it. Like, nobody's fucking passionate about error monitoring or whatever we do. Nobody cares. But what is interesting is like, oh, that technical problem is fun. I want to figure out how to solve that. I like that kind of technical problem. Or I like that you work with developers, or I don't know, I like shoes and I go work at a shoe company or something. You want to find the things you can combine because they're inherently going to give you an advantage. And I was just talking to our CFO's daughter, just graduated, and unfortunately she chose a bad major, I forget what it is. And so she's already at a disadvantage. She went to like MIT and then I forget where else, but she chose a bad major. And so she's got to compete with all these people that have already chosen the right major, right? And I'm like, look, first, go like talk to the AIs and figure out some shit, because like I have no idea what to do at this stage. And I'm like, find a company where you have something more to offer than just like, I can maybe write code or something, or I can learn. And so my early career, like I was a big gamer. Like I loved online games like Ultima Online, EverQuest, that era of shit, a long time ago. I don't know if anybody knows what those things are. World of Warcraft came out around that time. I started like reverse engineering these games to basically publish databases of the information, and I got a job by doing that. And I just like doing it, it was fun. And then that job turned into another job, and another job, and another job, and all it takes is one. But that was all just because I'm like, oh, this is really cool and interesting, and I want to figure it out. And it was video games. And I never got paid that much money at this time, to be clear. Different era of technology. technology, but it was something I was at least passionate about that I could connect to the thing that mattered. And so I think if you can find that, that goes a long ways. And I think that's also where like organically we see your passion. So if you it's hard if you force it. Like, oh, I need a side project, or I know like admissions, you're like, I need, I don't know, debate club, or whatever the random things are. I didn't do this, so I don't know. You need this thing that sets you apart. But if the thing is not interesting, or just looks like a random thing, nobody cares. It's just like as if it didn't exist on the resume. Like as an example, like I have a small team that reports to me. Everybody that we took applicants when I was hiring somebody on my team recently had to have a strong GitHub presence. They had to have thousands of commits on GitHub per year, or we disqualified them out of the game. And that's fine, because that's what we wanted in that role. And you're gonna find that at different kinds of companies where the expectations are just different. And so you may not wanna join those companies, or maybe you can't join those companies. And so you wanna find things that align, and you wanna find things where the people, more than anything, they don't have to be like the smartest people in the world, or like the people that are experts at, X, Y, and Z, but they have to be people that like you click with, of like, you just have these things in common. It's like a good example is like, some people work at Sentry because Sentry was open source and still cares about all these open source things. That's the only reason. That's the only connection they have to Sentry is they're like, we like open source, we like Sentry likes open source, cool, let's go. And so you find all these little things, and then you just gotta figure out how to like set yourself apart, but always do it with something that you care about. Because otherwise, like, it's so easy to see through stuff if it's just like, well, I did this because I was hoping it would help me. And it was almost like work instead of fun, I guess, if you will.
Yeah, maybe I'm slightly more AI-filled than you guys, but I was reading this blog from Anthropic this morning, and they were sort of talking about the new model that they released to some 40-odd companies.
Yeah, Mythos.
Yeah, and they basically were able to find some fairly deep vulnerabilities. Now, you mentioned that, like, maybe you're not as into AI as maybe me or Anthropic for that matter, but how do you see your business and what your customers are saying? Because software is not as tangible as, let's say, what a cloud provider provides. You can't achieve those economies of scale as a startup compared to Google or Amazon. So, and I saw your website and it has like Anthropic, for instance, as a customer. So what are these customers of yours saying? Because there's an angle where they might say, why don't we try to in-house some of this stuff? Or companies like Atlassian are suffering a lot because companies are saying, we can just in-house the software. So how are you approaching that? Because I don't think it can just be like a UX layer or UI layer. It has to be something a little bit more tangible than that.
So I think the first thing is like, don't believe anything on the internet. Atlassian spends $100 million a year on an F1 sponsorship. They're fine. Software is still very hard to build. Maybe it gets easier. I don't think there's evidence that it gets easier right now. I think there's a lot of marketing, like Jensen Huang being like, yeah, use more tokens. Use more tokens. We need to find ways to make our stuff sell even more. Anthropic's very much the same. I think the models are very impressive what you can do. Discovery of problems. You can already do this, by the way, with Opus. Like, we've done it internally at Sentry. Like, we automated vulnerability discovery. It's probably less efficient than Mythos is, so it's, and we don't have access to it. But what you quickly find is, because of what LLMs are, they're very good at pattern analysis. They are not good at the actual like system design and everything else that goes actually into engineering. And so they're very good at actually finding bugs. Or, for example, we build a root cause thing on top of LLMs. It actually works really, really well. And that is like one of the big strengths of them. But I would not, and I think most people would say I'm a realist, not a pessimist. I don't see any evidence that engineering gets offloaded to LLMs outside of engineers using them to do engineering. I don't see any evidence that suggests engineering becomes a less needed skill. Thus, all the resources that make engineering possible still stay there. And so that doesn't mean every, say, cloud service, for example, because there's also this like death of SaaS, which is also completely fabricated. There's a death of things that never were valuable in the first place. That might be temporary, by the way, because as somebody who buys the software at the company and makes decisions at the corporate level, I don't want Richard writing fucking HR software. It is not a good spend of our time. I don't want HR software that sucks, and so we're hoping that AI and the push of this will bring people in to build better alternatives, and then we will pay them money still, because it just doesn't matter to us. There's like the Bezos quote that's like really famous about, do the thing that makes your beer taste good, and ignore everything else, or something like this. I don't totally agree with that sentiment because it's a little binary, but there's a big truth to that. And so that's why this like death of SaaS is not very real. But it doesn't mean technology doesn't change. And I think you gotta look at two things. Like for ourselves, for example, we look at how do we leverage the technology to do more and how do we improve our product with the technology. And that's how you stay relevant. But IBM still exists. And so also think about it from the lens where like seemingly anybody that becomes successful never really goes away. And there could be many new innovations that come that we don't know about yet that do change the narrative. I don't think they will. But for example, the big thing we are focused on that is sort of the macro futuristic version is like, how close can you get to self-healing software today? Because you actually still need everything we do to be able to do self-healing. You need all the telemetry, you need the data that comes into the system. We also have the largest corpus of RL data for, like we have every error in the world basically. And that is valuable data. Maybe there's nothing useful we can do with it from a model point of view, but it is valuable data and we are the ones that actually manage that data for people. And so we very much look at it for like, how can we take what we have and benefit customers, but also it's like, even Anthropic, we closely partner with Anthropic on a lot of things, but every frontier model uses Sentry, as do most technology companies, to be fair. And I think you'll find if you talk to, and I don't know who ends up showing up at Purdue, but if you actually talk to engineers and they aren't bullshitting you at like Anthropic or OpenAI, you'll find they're not all that different than anybody else in the way they do their day-to-day job. And they're mostly just like, YOLO, how do I make this LLM do the right thing like everybody else? And I'm very, very serious about this. And so I think there's a lot of things to be excited by, but there is a lot of noise on the internet right now. And especially the material that comes out of these companies is very, to justify their valuations, they have to be very pie in the sky kind of thing, which is totally fair. And I think, I'm sure Mythos is very impressive. I don't know if anybody can afford the cost for what it does for some of these things. It's already very expensive for everything, but I just wouldn't over-rotate too much on that. I think all the core fundamentals and all the things we do are just as important as they ever were, maybe more now, because the industry will expand. And every big boom in technology, the industry expands. And this one's gonna expand dramatically. We already see it, and I don't know if you see all the numbers, we are now, I think, 100% year-over-year growth on free scientists, which is an absurd thing in our scale. You don't see acceleration of growth generally at a late-stage company like us. And it's accelerated because there's new people coming into the field that are not from the engineering background, that are trying to build little e-commerce shops or something, right? And think about it from that way. Again, it's venture, not private equity. And so always think about what's the growth and how do you capture the growth versus protect what you have, you know?
I think even though for the last 2-3 months it's like 60% increase or something crazy like that. Like
Yeah.
it's like literally like a hockey stick where like free scientists are going up insanely fast. And that's great news.
And it's all organic. Like we have nothing to do with this.
Yeah.
Like we're the default, but that's it.
Yeah.
Tons of AI startups use us. Like my friends who are like founders at these companies, they're like, yo, like we heard about Sentry, we're using Sentry. It's like it changes the way that I work. Like we have a whole program, Sentry for startups, that like help these like startups. We're growing like a ton.
Yeah. So the reality is like you ship software, it's broken. Somebody needs to know about it. Maybe one day that's an agent, but that signal is still like really, really critical. And so, but again, we adapt to a lot of this too. We stick our data inside of harnesses. Like you can one-shot a lot of bugs in Sentry now, but you have to pull that data out of Sentry to do it. And so we're working on like how do we automate those things and whatnot. But.
I was wondering what your guys' teams are doing with like testing and like validating like changes to like microservices. I know you mentioned like changes don't end like after you merge, and I was wondering like as the rise of like Cursor and like Cloud Code like change like how you do like CI and CD pipelines from like going from like a Jira ticket to production.
I think it's hard for Claude or Cursor to predict what is going to happen in production. So a lot of times you still have to have, like a lot of like monitoring set up on the microservices to make sure that they're performing as expected after you merge a change. So like Claude can give you some ideas of like what you might monitor, but like it's still not good at being comprehensive, and it's still up to you to be like very comprehensive, very detailed. And also like Claude is really bad at rollback plans. Like if you deploy something and like shit hits the fan, Claude is not that. Like we had an incident where we like added a bunch of nodes into our database, and and then we just, like, the replication delay between, like, replicas within the same shard just, like, went all the way up, and we're like, what the fuck is happening? And it's like 4 in the morning, guys, 4 in the morning. Claude didn't know what was going on. We have to, like, look at Datadog and, like, have that systematic way of thinking and realize that, like, Zookeeper is, like, shitting his pants. So, no, Cursor and Claude didn't really help in that case.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of this for us. I will say I've been impressed. For whatever reason, I was responding to an incident like I don't know the date, like December 23rd or some shit. I'm not on call, to be clear. My job is not to write code for the company, even though I like to try to do it. And I was hoping to respond to an incident mostly because it's holidays. It's harder to get a hold of people even if they're on call. And I'm like, I'll jump in and see what's going on. And I once upon a time wrote a lot of the code. To be fair, a lot of it actually hasn't changed that much. So I still kind of know how Sentry works, but I don't know everything. In this area, I definitely didn't know. But I know how to debug systems. So the fundamentals were still really important. So I know that when load goes up on application servers, 100% it's a database problem all the time. Maybe it's 99%, but that doesn't matter. And so I'm like, okay, you can see it's a database problem. Just go into the query log, tell me what query is at the top for duration, and that is the problem. That is always true. And that's just you learn this stuff. It's like trial by fire. And I'm like, give me that query. I'm just going to toss it into Claude, and it'll figure out where it is in the code base. It does, like that. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is good. It is useful for analysis. When it has the right information and it can access everything.
Again, good at searching. If you know how to take advantage of it, know what tasks it's good at, it can be very, very good.
But it did not give the answer. Christine Long had the answer. I didn't even figure out, like, how do you solve it? Database load is high. We had this issue with the deadlock. My theory, maybe I'm rusty, I don't know, was not the best solution. My theory is like, drop the data, it's okay, we can use it. Claude, yeah, it was with the locking of the tokens. Claude, I think, came up with some just wacky bug fix ideas. And then somebody's like, oh, actually, if we just update this row, this value to this value, we don't lose any data whatsoever, it short circuits the whole thing. Sure, maybe an LLM can do that one day. But we are still very far from a lot of these things being like hyper-functional. Like maybe we get 10%, 20%, 30% productivity gains, but we're so far from this sort of future. But I think there's a lot of promise there too. And so like, I don't know, we've invested a lot in kind of verification, but not in a useful way, where we have stuff that tries to automatically review code. It's a super mixed bag. You'll find bugs here and there, but it mostly finds bugs in AI-generated code.
It's good at finding bugs, but it also doesn't it doesn't do nearly as good of a job as a human, right? Like composition-wise, right? Like how one writes code.
Design.
It's right. It
garbage.
Does not look at that. So you could have code that, again, it works. If you test it out, it does technically work. It doesn't have any bugs in it, so it's not going to throw any errors. But should this piece of code be merged into our code base? Any human looking at that would say absolutely not. But a code AI reviewer, even a good one, will say, yeah, it's fine, right? It doesn't. I think it's okay. I think that's where like people have to be careful. I think once you let a lot of kind of shitty code get into your code base, and then agents look at your code base to see what to do, and it kind of replicates from there, and then you just end up with this pile of slop. Like it's much harder to kind of build yourself back from that. So trying to snip that early is important.
And if you're familiar, I assume most people know OpenClause or ClaudeBot. That is the definition of absolute garbage code. And I know some of the people, and the people that work on this will tell you this is true. They cannot solve it. It's literally an unsolvable problem. Maybe that's okay in their case. It's a little questionable. It doesn't need to be secure. It's a random hobby project, but that's not okay for like Sentry, for like production code. And so you can do that. You can make it run. It's also why the code is like 1,000 times bigger in terms of like lines of code and stuff than it needs to be, because there is no way for these LLMs right now. At least nobody's found a mechanism that will allow you to sort of rein in the outputs of LLMs. So yeah, it'll write code that probably runs, and I think like OpenAI's models are particularly good at this, but it is absolutely awful code from a long-term sustainability in an organization. And so I think that's actually like, and you see this from like, I don't know what kind of access everybody has, but if you use like Anthropic's products, you'll notice they're buggy all the time, and there's always outages. Some of that's because there's a lot of load, there's a lot of growth they have. Some of it's from they're writing all their code with agents, and they just can't only do so much, you know. And so and that'll probably get a little bit better, but it's really hard, you know. But there are impressive things, like the security stuff is super impressive what you can do with it. Also super scary what that's going to translate into the industry because it's a cat and mouse game, but But there's a lot of stuff like that that I think opens up a lot of new avenues. So.
I have a non-AI question to change the pace. So, what's an interesting infrastructure problem that you've had to solve at Sentry?
Um,
Well.
Right now.
well, there are like two, but maybe it's like a recency bias. Like one that I just talked about was just like we added like a bunch of nodes, like 1/3 or something of the cluster like size, and like Zookeeper couldn't keep up, and it was because there are these things called Z nodes that like index onto your tables, and we added like a bunch of them at the same time. Like Zookeeper just could not keep up. That was interesting because we were, we were so confused. Like, why did restarting Zookeeper not help? But that's been like a while. I think that was like in February. The most recent infrastructure problem that we had to solve was like we experienced a lot of like load on our cluster, and it's because of organic growth. We were just getting way more customers, and we also like the team were like servicing more of Sentry's existing products. So we're just like having more queries. So we have an organic increase of load, and the next logical and cheapest step is to vertically upscale the cluster. And when vertically upscaling specific nodes, we ran into issues, which is kind of a huge replication delay, even though it was only down for a couple of minutes. So there were and by the way, Claude is absolutely shit at this. Like we tried to put Claude on to like give us some ideas of like what to even look into, but like ultimately it was like a human effort in realizing there was like a bug with actually GCP, our provider, when they were doing disk snapshots. Like they had a bug where the snapshots were not working. That's one of them. The two of them, like it has to do with like how we route traffic. We should route traffic away from the nodes that we're upgrading, or at least most of the traffic away before essentially the upgrade, because we cannot handle that amount of traffic. Again, we have a lot of customers and a lot of queries. That one is definitely the most recent one, and the one that I had to do a lot of upgrades for. So that one is very baked into my brain.
I think as a product engineer, one of the things that we've been dealing with recently is like we went on call about 6 months ago, 24/7 on call. We're a team of about 10 or 11 engineers. None of us have ever been on call before. So that was a very big transition for us. And one of the projects that we've kind of been doing is like, how do we make this, being 24/7 on call is like a guarantee. Like we're absolutely going to have to do that. How do we make that process as easy as possible? How do we make this something that like every engineer just doesn't want to quit right now because they're on call? And we put a lot of work into kind of trying to make this process as like seamless and as not enjoyable, because no one's going to enjoy this, but how do we minimize impact there? And I was just looking at the numbers this week. For an on-call cycle, that's everyone on the team is on call once. It's with 10 people on the team, it's about 10 weeks, but roughly 2.5 months. In our previous on-call cycle, we had about 65 page duty notifications go out. That included one incident that alone accounted for about 40, 45 of them. But that's a lot, right? That's almost one a day. We put a lot of work into making that number go down. In the last cycle, it was down to 8. So 65 down to 8. That 8, we made one change about halfway through the cycle. If we had made that change at the beginning of January, at the beginning of the cycle, it would have been down to 1, right? So that kind of work for us has been really important, where yes, it was infrastructure work, yes, it was just updating like monitors and alerts and that kind of stuff to be less noisy, but that's a problem that had really, really big consequences. And yes, we've been lucky in that as a company we haven't had any major incidents that have contributed to it, but we put a lot of work in kind of minimizing that impact of being on call. And it's something that everyone can get behind. Everyone's really enthusiastic about working on that because it makes their lives a lot easier, and that's been really cool.
Yeah, I did this when I was doing build infrastructure at Dropbox. I had this very vivid memory because I would just have to deal with odd workloads and just couldn't scale, and so I had to build the system so it would just like self-recover from literally non-stop failures. It was always erroring out for some reason, so it would just fix itself. Which mostly was like it would just try again, and it would try again for infinity. It would just never stop. And I remember I was on call for this because you just are, and I was in like Napa or something, and I had this thing. I don't like carrying around a computer. And so, to the point where I had a laptop at the office and a laptop at home that was a work laptop because it wouldn't let me use a personal one. And I didn't bring it. And and somebody calls me and I'm like, why are you calling me kind of thing? They're like, hey, there's an incident, blah, 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 isn't working. I'm like, that's impossible. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's fine. I'm pretty sure it will fix itself, and this is actually somebody else's fault. And it was, actually, to be fair. But it was the same premise of like, if you don't want to get paged, you gotta make it so you don't get paged. It's like, how do you prevent this stuff from like actually causing like an outage or an issue? And you learn that pretty quickly. I actually think that's like the most important part of being on call is like, how do I not have to deal with being on call? But yeah, there's lots of like, I don't know, going back to like customers and stuff. I had this horrifying memory. This is when, because like I bootstrapped Sentry and I was the only engineer working on it, and I was working a full-time job elsewhere, and it's an infrastructure company with a lot of data that would come in, and I had no money because it was bootstrapped. So I'm like, how do I get the cheapest servers? And so it was always overloaded. And I had this memory where I was coming back from Europe, where I was speaking at a conference. I landed in like Boston or something, and I get like an uptime alert, like Sentry's down, and I'm like, oh no. And I think I had like 15 minutes before my flight was like departing or something. And this is pre Wi-Fi on airplanes, so it's even worse. Maybe it wasn't pre Wi-Fi, but there was definitely no Wi-Fi on this flight. This is not cloud computing. I had no way to like just add more compute or anything. I'd have to order a new server to make this go away. And so I'm like, okay, I think I can wipe this thing, which is a very complicated subject, but like I think I don't know if we still have the Redis buffers. People mostly hate them, but I think it's a brilliant design. And it was overloaded, and I'm like, oh, I'll wipe this, and it looked like it was recovering. And I remember getting on and I sat there, I'm like, okay, actually, I think it's safe. I think I'm good, I think it's good. And I'm the last person to board the plane. And they're like, are you sure you got a couple minutes? I'm like, I'm good, I'm good. Get on the plane. Because I had to make the decision, am I getting on the plane or like missing my flight? Get on the plane, get another notification, Sentry's down. Doors closed, I'm stuck on the plane. 8-hour flight, Sentry's down the whole time. And we had like 1,000 customers at this point. I will tell you, I got 0 complaints about that downtime. It's kind of strange. I get complaints about the most random stuff in that area because we'd have some big customers. But this one, nobody said anything. I'm like, but it was down. It was hard down. Like you couldn't view anything for 8 hours. And I will tell you, that stuff is not fun. That is very stress-inducing. That was a very, very long flight.
So when you hire interns or people in co-ops for like a short-term position, how do you have ownership of that? Like how do you give interesting projects that can be done in the time but also add value, and also like do you struggle with tech debt with like some of these new interns maybe raising not the best quality merges?
I mean, I think the easy way to solve that is you're not merging bad code, right? Like interns still have to go through code review, right? If anything, their mentor is going to have a sharper eye for that kind of stuff because they know they're dealing with a younger engineer. I think we've done a very good job at giving interns good projects, right? We're not bringing on 200 interns every semester or every quarter or something like that. I remember when I was interning at Sentry, like I said earlier, we had about 150, 160 people at the company. I remember that year alone, I went to UC Berkeley. Amazon had hired almost 200 interns from Berkeley for that summer's class, right? So more interns from one school were going to Amazon than total, at the time it was a $1 billion company. I think in having that kind of a smaller intern class, you can be a little bit pickier about the project you give them. And we've given interns really, really good projects, right? One of our interns once started the Discord integration that we have, right? Like that's a project we easily could have given an associate level engineer. But an intern was able to handle it. Yes, they didn't fully complete it, but they were able to get into a place where they were, they had some tickets left that got handed off to someone else, but they did the vast majority, right? So I think careful planning, making sure you don't add too many interns so you can make sure that they have good projects and good experiences overall. But yeah, interns have a lot of kind of authority over their projects. They own it front to end. They're thinking about it, they're planning it, they're executing on it, with the help of other people, of course, but doing an internship at Sentry is a really rewarding experience.
I never interned at Sentry, so I can't speak about the internship experience per se, but I do want to say that like Sentry puts a lot of work into like designing the projects, and like your mentors will work super closely with you. When I was a new grad, like I was part of the Sentry's like mentorship program. Sentry invests in a lot of like mentorship, and so have a very strong program, so like everyone's like super invested in your growth, like as a new grad, so I'm sure like that's also the case for interns as well.
Yeah, and the fundamental goal is just like have a project that's like a real thing, is easily isolated, and is not sort of mission critical. And the mission critical is, if nothing else, it's because like, if it's mission critical, it has to get done, and internships are a little bit variable. And so it's usually something of substance, but that has a lot of flexibility into it.
We don't do this thing where we like, I've heard of this, like other companies do this, but like the interns would do a project and then after your internship is over, they're like team deletes, like whatever they do, like that doesn't happen as an intern.
I mean, I haven't heard delete, but I've heard just like put on the shelf, like it doesn't get lost.
We've done that for some employees though, where like the employees are like, they got this.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question more related to maybe the culture. I mean, like when you're designing something or some feature, how do you handle the disagreements in the opinion, or there are some tiebreakers or something like that?
Like how do I handle disagreements in
Yeah.
like design meetings? Well, like the one question you just like really gotta ask them is just like why you're doing this, because a lot of times like product teams will come to like us, like the infrastructure / database team, and be like, I have this use case and I want you to do this specific thing so my use case can get service. But I think like, you know, like if you just like limit yourself to like that context, you can get into disagreements or like explain like, no, this is not how our database can work. It's gonna be a very hard change. So like I think what will work better like to handle these disagreements is to like ask them like, why do you want this use case? Like what exactly is it that you want to do? Because a lot of times like their suggested approach could be replaced by something that's better, and it will also work better for them. So I think like asking that like deeper why will get you guys on the same page. I mean ultimately you guys work at the same company, so disagreements are usually more like technical, and it's very easy to get around them.
Yeah, I don't have this problem.
As a CEO, looking back on the past, can you tell us what you've learned in some key points in your life that brought you to the chair you're sitting in today? And then on top of that, could you tell me where you want to grow in the next 10 years, and like as a person or as a CEO?
Not a CEO.
Not a CEO anymore.
Not a CEO.
I hired the CEO 6 years ago now. It's weird. I get a lot of different titles regularly at this point. I think I'm still the CEO, the CTO. My technical title is CPO right now, but it's because it was free, and so I needed to give myself something. But I think the biggest thing you learn, founder is more important of a job than CEO is what I would tell you first and foremost. Like I am not and never will be like a CEO of a company. Like I'll be a founder of a company, and I will do the job of whatever is needed at that company. But what you learn as a founder, especially as a founder, is the entire skill set is entirely limited to that role. Everything you learn along the way does not help you in almost anything else in life. And I think the most important thing you learn, which is probably actually always who I've been, is you are ultimately responsible for everything. This is actually true for a CEO as well. It's complicated essentially because like I'm on the board and I have a very loud voice, but I'm not the CEO. But I technically report to the CEO and control his job to some degree because I'm on the board. And so it's a weird relationship. But what happens in that situation is normally the buck stops with the CEO, right? They're responsible for the problems. That's not generally true when you have a hired CEO at a company. They don't treat it the same way. If you have a founder, I know that I am solely responsible for the company's succeed. Like everything rests on me doing the most I can for the company because nobody else will at the end of the day. Nobody else will try as hard as I will. Partially because nobody's financially motivated like I am. Like I own more equity than any single individual at the company, which is worth a lot of money. Part of it's because nobody will care as much as you about the work. And so that's probably the most important thing you get out of it is like, you know, you actually do have to do all the shit. Somebody's got to do it, and if they're not doing it, you have to do it no matter what. And if that's it, if that's all you take away from it, that is like the most important like lesson of everything. The rest doesn't actually really matter that much. What was the second part of the question?
I guess, how do you want to grow?
How do I
founder even now?
Yeah, I actually think a lot about like I've talked to folks like what would I do in the future, And I told the company that I'm at the company because the company is more valuable with me at it, and I would be at the company while that remains true. I had no idea how I would grow or what I want to do. I always thought about, like, there's all these hypothetical outcomes for Sentry. We're pretty late stage. There's a hypothetical outcome where the company goes public. There's a hypothetical outcome where we get acquired by a very large company. There's a very low chance hypothetical outcome where everything crashes or burns, but honestly, if that happens to us, it probably happens to everybody, so we're probably okay. And then you think about those situations, you're like, well, what would be interesting about those situations? Because usually learning comes from like interest or like new experiences. And one of the challenges with Sentry today, and this is especially true pre-AI, AI is much more exciting now, but it's like, well, what is there for me for growth? There were actually, I would tell you that I, in absolute confidence, felt like I was not learning or anything at the company for a very long period of time. And then LLMs happen, and I'm like, this is exciting. There's new technology, there's new problems to solve, there's new chaos and all these things. And that's really what my skill set lends to. Beyond that, I don't know, it's always hard. But I do think like, you kind of just you find things that like engage you and you want to spend more time in, and that's, I don't know, that's the best way to do it. So I don't have a good concrete answer. But I think the best thing you can always do as a person is find something you really like doing, or you find a lot of value in doing, hopefully not just monetarily, and you just organically grow, and if you aren't, then you should challenge somebody and be like, why am I doing this? Or you should consider doing something else. And that's like a really important lesson. There's a lot of people that will stay at jobs for a very long period of life when the job is very bad for them. I know somebody who just left Dropbox after like 15 years. Extraordinarily sharp guy, highest paid individual in the company that's not an executive. Was only there for the money at this point. Hated the job. And like for like 6 years would try to quit over and over. Never did. He finally did. And he should have done it a long time ago because he wasn't enjoying it, he wasn't learning, it wasn't fun. And so that doesn't quite answer the question, but that's how I came about it at the very least.
Do you guys, I guess any of you can answer this question, but in terms of advice on how to look for a company to join, obviously I think a lot of us are just getting whatever we can, but if we have the benefit of choice as a leader of these companies, how do we know this company is where I want to be?
I mean, I think it's, at the end of the day, a very personal decision. I think there's a couple things to look out for. Number one, it's like, who are you going to be working with, right? Both in kind of a, like, in a 360 way, like, who are your coworkers going to be? What team are you going to be on? Do you get along with them, right? At the end of the day, you are spending at least 40 hours a week working with these people for the next, ideally, many, many years. If you hate working with them and you can't stand them, that's going to be a terrible 40 hours every single week. In the other direction, looking up, like looking at the leadership of the company, right? If the leadership is making all these decisions and you just fundamentally disagree with them, that's not going to work well, right? Every single day you're going to come into work and you're going to have some kind of problem with your leadership, right? It's exhausting, right, being in that position, right? If you so fundamentally disagree with them, don't work at the company. It saves you a lot of stress. It is kind of hard to give this advice right now, given what the market looks like. Like you said, I think I was maybe one of the last graduating years that had any bit of choice when graduating and being able to pick a job. But I do think there is still some value to trying to be a little bit picky with the companies you're choosing. David mentioned it earlier, but like really caring about like what you're working on, right? Like he said, at Sentry, like at the end of the okay, it's an error monitoring product, right? It's an application monitoring product. But I've been here 3.5 years. Like the problems that we're able to solve, that kind of stuff, it still motivates me. It's still really, really interesting, especially with all this AI stuff coming in, right? Like find something you want to work on. It's corny. They always say like, if you like what you do, work a day in your life or whatever like that. Like I think that's a little bit of an exaggeration, right? At the end of the day,
It would still work. It's still work.
Yeah, right. Like it is a job, but like it's a much easier job if you care about what you're working on and if you like what you're working on.
There are really like two things that I consider. Like one is like, do you vibe with the people that you're working with? Like if you don't vibe with them, you're probably not going to enjoy very much. And like you do that by like talking to the people, right? Like having conversations with the team that you might join, the people at the company that like you're connected with. Like for example, Roblox has a really strong gaming culture. So like everyone who works there is like a gamer, like in their free time. So you probably want to be really into gaming. You want to work on Roblox. So the culture fit is like super important. And the other thing is like, are you like excited by, you know, something at the company? I worked at trading, as one of my internships, and I thought, you know, I don't know, I thought trading was my calling for some reason. It's not, because I realized something that really excites me is building something that a lot of people will use. More people than the traders at my desk. So like building these like software that only 3 traders at your desk will use, that, you know, generates a lot of money. Like sure, the revenue numbers look great, but at the end of the day, it's about 3 users, right? And that is just nowhere as exciting as like the Sentry product, which so many people use. So those are the 2 things I would really evaluate.
And the thing I'll say is like, we've been, you know, we work for Sentry, we've been seeing a lot of really good stuff about Sentry. There's a really, really good chance that some of you might hate working at Sentry, right? Like, just because we're saying good things about it and it works for us, doesn't mean it works for you, right? If this interests you, you think it's a cool product, please, come apply. If that is not the case, don't feel pressure, right? Just because you hear someone say something good about a company that worked for them, does not mean it's gonna work well for you, right? Always kind of reconsider, always think about it, and be careful when making those decisions.
Yeah, I think the most choice you're gonna have, ideally, is like, because not every company does internships, let alone new grads, it's usually at least medium stage, somewhere in there. And if for some reason the opportunities you get are gonna be like a really large company, like an Amazon or something, maybe you gotta do a little bit of the time, if you will, but at least push to be in a place that you think is interesting there. Like a really good analogy is like, and we experience this because when we go source, when we try to take people from other companies, it's very hard at large companies because some teams are phenomenal. There's some phenomenal people at every company in the world. Not everybody at these companies are good, for us. And that can actually be really hard to see, especially from the outside. And if we can't see it, you're probably not gonna be able to see it unless you've worked with them directly. But it might be that like, you kind of have a little bit of power once you're in a job. And so if you don't walk into like, oh, I really like this team or this technology, and I actually do think choice of technology and types of things you're working on do matter immensely. You do not want to get trapped doing, a really good example, you don't want to get trapped on like working on like third-party partnerships or integrations or just, it's frankly like boilerplate work that needs to get done, but it's not a career, and it doesn't really level you up beyond a certain degree. And so you want to make sure you're in a spot like that. But if you kind of get an opportunity that's like, well, this is a bigger company, it's good, it's secure, it'll get me in the door, I think that's fine. And if you hate what you're working on, either, I don't know, push very hard to get on something else more interesting. And I think a lot of companies, I think this is still true, the new grad programs kind of give you a little bit of flexibility, or just turn it into something else in a couple of years. Like, I think it's totally okay to go to Amazon and be like, this company sucks, I'm gonna go somewhere else in 2 years. If they don't care, you shouldn't care either. It's a little bit more impactful if you do it at a smaller company like Sentry, because we don't hire, you know, however many people they hire every year. But I do think it's really, really important that you like the people, like everybody said, and I think the technology, the things you work on actually matter a lot for like the long-term horizon of your career. And so it's like, and you'll find people that have worked at Google for 10, 15, 20 years, they can't go anywhere else. Like their entire value, their entire sort of expertise is actually Google expertise. It's not software engineering or anything like that. And that's, for some people that's fine, they accept that and they'll go somewhere else and take like a different role. Lots of people can't accept like going somewhere else. And so just keep that in mind as you think about your career. Like, you want multiple experiences. And what I would always guide people towards, and what we liked to hire for back in the day at Sentry, is like, I wanted people with both late stage larger company experience and early stage experience. Late stage sort of gives you a professionalism about structure and things that matter. Early stage allows you to understand chaos and that things don't actually need all solved for you. You can figure them out and sort of choose your own adventure. Mm-hmm. And so I would at least encourage everybody to try to have a little bit of diversity if you can in your choice. And this is especially useful if you still have opportunities for internships and maybe you can go through 2 different kinds of companies instead of just be like, I'm going to go to this one company over and over and over and over. You know, unless you love it, that's totally fine too. But yeah, I think, yeah, some of it's like luck of the draw. It's like if you can break in, break in. If it seems really good, you know, do a little bit of research if it's not a big company, because there's just a lot of like bad startups that are borderline fraud. And so just be cautious with that.
I'm sure there's some that are just straight up fraud.
There's a lot that are borderline was a nice way to talk about. Don't go work for a compliance company.
They posted like a tweet saying like YC and us parted ways, and then Gary Tan like hours later was like, We asked them to leave.
Yeah, maybe, what is it, Forbes 30 under 30s?
Yeah. This is a real phenomenon. Avoid Forbes 30 under 30. Statistically speaking.
Yeah, it's not a good. Any other questions? I feel like we've covered a lot of topics here.
Yeah, I want to ask, how is your interview process structured, and how do you assess the technical competence of candidates?
Yeah, so the interview process right now is currently, I believe it's HackerRank, technical interview, hiring manager interview, more systems design, technical question. Is there a final one, Stephanie? Am I missing one?
Yeah, it's too technical. Too technical. The hacker rank is like a pre-screen, I guess.
HackerRank is the pre-screen, and then technical, hiring manager, second technical. The second technical is a little bit more system design focused. First one's a little bit more algorithms.
I think it's like one's like lead code, basically. Right?
Yeah, that's the first.
So lead code,
And then the second one's a little more system design.
But it's not like the most annoying lead code.
No,
It's like more pragmatic.
it's a very reasonable interview process. We don't throw any curveballs. It's again, I would say like top piece of advice, like don't overcomplicate. We don't do anything super different from a lot of other companies. It's a very kind of straightforward process.
okay, good to know. And like for projects, you get a chance to like, give a demo and explain them.
Yeah, I think if there's a recruiter screen or a hiring manager interview, usually you kind of dive deeper a little bit into the projects you worked on. Maybe not give a demo and show it, but just being able to kind of explain it and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
We removed the hacker.
Yes, that's right. No more hacker.
No more hacker.
Oh, no more.
No more hacker. Yeah.
Just cheating.
Everyone kept cheating on it. Like, okay, can I just say this? Like, I don't think like everyone understands. Like, it is so easy to tell. If you're cheating.
Oh, yeah, it's very easy to tell.
It's so easy to tell because we can see like a Google Docs history of your HackerRank stuff. So a bunch of candidates come in 5 minutes later, copy paste, one shot an answer, and it's like, cool. Where did you get that? Oh, ChatGPT. And they're all the same answer, of course. The second thing is like during your interviews, don't use OpenAI or ChatGPT or whatever on your phone. That's also really easy to tell. It happens way too often. Just like that. Too many people are doing that. I don't know why, but
I think the Cluely thing never worked by the way.
No.
Like this stuff is so. The only time
It's
it
so
works,
obvious.
if you go work at Amazon and the interviewer doesn't give a fuck about their job, sure, but they just don't care. If you were to interview somewhere like Sentry, it is very clear as day.
It's so obvious.
Like yeah, and it's just not worth it. You'd rather not know the answer, but be able to like rationalize and have a good conversation with like critical thinking, and you still have a good shot.
Yeah.
It's way better than like, oh, if I just get this answer right, I got like it just doesn't help the case.
And if you get caught, that's just like an automatic.
Yeah, we shunned Michigan because one of the students cheated when we were interviewing them. This is a real story.
Yeah.
My follow-up question is, how do you like respond when you see candidates using
we don't stop as far as I'm aware in the middle of the interview and just be like, oh my god, what are you doing? Goodbye. But like as soon as the interview is done, usually like you have like a little bit of retro, and that's like the first thing that comes up, and it's just like let's save everyone's time with not finished.
If you have to cheat to be somewhere, you probably shouldn't be there. Like, don't cheat your way there.
And I actually think, and I don't know how hard this is for y'all, I think the best way you can break it is if you know somebody or, and it doesn't have to be like cheating the system, but you sort of need somebody to give you a shot at somewhere you want to be. That's usually it, right? One could argue, if you can cheat and get that shot, maybe it's fine. Don't do it at Sentry. Do it at Amazon, we don't care. But yeah, I think you just need somebody to like help you out, like put you alumni or something, to, like connect people.
Referrals are good. Events like this, like if you came by the booth earlier, we had an application link that was like specific for Purdue. That means like you're gonna review a resume a little bit faster and you kind of raise above everyone else that's applied. Like that kind of stuff is super valuable, right? I mean, someone's actually, going back to that 40,000 number. Human eyes are gonna look at everyone's resume. You apply through that Purdue link, someone's gonna look at your resume, right? That's already significantly better than just kind of randomly applying to it.
I think this kind of goes off what you just said. If you've already applied previously, same job, title, and then you get the Purdue link, should we apply again, or?
We're going into the application system and like manually.
Yeah, just like if for this specific example, if it's for the fall internship, please tell one of us, maybe Stephanie's,
You can come see me afterwards.
and we'll make sure.
And if you didn't get the link, we're gonna be
Lawson? Any final questions?
Okay, so I think one of the early questions was like talking about so I was just wondering because I actually use what are y'all's thoughts on post-con and like you guys are good at like
I'll keep it real here.
Okay.
I'm an investor in Post-Hog and I
Oh,
fucking despise that company. I am vindictive as shit. And I kid you not, I don't know if everybody knows this at Sentry. We have the startup program at Sentry to ruin Post-Hog. I only started this because I was so pissed off that they ripped off our product. They like copy pasted our product.
Yeah.
Like it's just like embarrassingly bad. Which is annoying because I actually thought Post-Hog was great before that. From an objective point of view, they're not really a competitor. We already stopped the thing that caused problems for us, which was the startup program. They're trying to do too much. I don't understand the mechanics of their business at this point. They have a lot of product checkboxes that are not very good. This sort of error monitoring thing that they do that would try to compete with us, people that have tried it have just told me it just doesn't work that well. It's like broken all over the place. It turns out software is not that easy to build. And so even if you can kind of like make it look similar, yeah, you might trick some people, they might not care, but the vast majority of people are just like, nah, we can use two different people for two different things. So I personally find it very annoying. Practically speaking, it's not a big deal for us, but it's very annoying.
I mean, I remember when that happened, I already didn't like them too much as a company. I think them plastering San Francisco with that stupid guy's face on every single bus and every single ad, I hated that.
It's a little egomaniac.
I don't know why they have toothpick on their like website redesign. I don't know why that was a good idea. I just think they're like, it's very cringy to look at some of the stuff they're doing. And I know
They're marketing people as their backgrounds.
right? Like I know that's a bad way to judge a company, and like some people might not like what we do in Sentry either, but like personal taste wise, I am not a fan of that whole situation.
I have this moral code thing. I've written about it on my blog a few times because us being open source history, the reason we're fair source is because of people like Post-Hog. Not Post-Hog specifically, it was GitLab. But I have this sort of like ethical thing where it's like we give a lot back to the ecosystem. We actually take very little from open source. Like pretty much everybody that ever touched Sentry code works or worked at Sentry. But we give it all away, we sponsor a lot of people, and so it especially rubs me the wrong way when you take our technology and try to commercialize it without ever giving back, because hypothetically if we were to lose, which we will not, it just cuts off all of it. Like nothing sustains. That's like the risk of open source is like, there's a belief system where, oh, well it's open source, so you know everybody should use it and competition helps everybody. But if it's like, if we maintain 100% software, and somebody else is able to commercialize it better but doesn't help maintain it, software actually just dies. And so, Post-Hog didn't necessarily do this, but there's a bunch of companies that try to take our technology because it's open source, because we have this sort of belief system, and they try to commercialize it, and they don't have good intent with it. I don't know Post-Hog's intent because I basically told them to F off as soon as this happened, but it just doesn't sit right with me, personally. Yeah.
No question?
I've got one final question.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned a couple times that you didn't end up going to college, that you did your whole college thing. What did your path kind of look like, and how did you end up learning the things that you learned along the way?
Don't take this as a role model kind of thing. Like, stay in school. I dropped out of high school. I'm from a working class family in Nebraska. I dropped out of high school because, I don't know, like bad decisions were made. And my family allowed it. So my family's the blame. I dropped out freshman year of high school. Or I guess the end of freshman year of high school. And many years later, so I don't know, I would have been like 15 years old, when I was like 22 or 21 or I think 22. I'm like, oh, it'd be cool to go to college. Oh, I never graduated high school. So I had to go get my GED. And then I started a community college. I wanted to go to like, this is really dumb. I was already working in tech, but I had moved, I'm from Nebraska, I had moved back to Nebraska. And I'm like, oh, maybe I should go to the college and it'd be cool to get like a PhD so I could be Dr. Kramer. It intentionally sounds just as dumb as I mean it. And I'm like, and it can't be that hard. I'm pretty good at the software engineering. I'm self-taught and all this stuff. But I didn't know that many things at the time, and I've learned a lot more since then, to be fair. And it's all just lived experiences. And so then I did the GED thing, started community college. It turned out that sucked too. And so I dropped out like 5 months in, and then I moved to San Francisco, and I'm like, that doesn't matter. maybe I'll get an honor or everything someday. But no, I'm just self-taught, and I really like building things. I mean, for the longest time at Sentry, I had not really had the opportunity to write a lot of software because the industry had gotten really complex. Side projects would take multiple days to get off the ground and stuff, and it was just like not fun in a lot of ways. And I couldn't contribute to Sentry because like I have other jobs at work, and it would I couldn't be sort of on call, if you will, to ship production code, and it would just take way too long to get a patch. And so I had all this like entire career where I had just like really enjoyed building software. I built a lot of sort of tools for myself and open source for other people and things like that. Got better and better and better, and it's fun in a Sentry. But then like AI was kind of this full circle moment for me, which is then like really fun, where it's like all of that early passion for software just like came back overnight. And it's like, oh, it's fun again. I can do things again. I can contribute again. And I don't know. I think for me it was just I really like doing it. This is why I always say find something you really enjoy doing that ideally also pays the bills really well. May not be developer tools or infrastructure, maybe some weird art engineering shit, I don't know, probably didn't pay the bills, but I think it's really important. And for me, it was just always like, building software was like the thing that was just really, really fun, so. And like, the more you're interested in something, the more you're gonna succeed at it, that's all it is. Simple equation, and it's lots and lots of time.
Awesome, thank you. All right.
Did anyone do anything fun at spring break? No. Huh? That's hard. No one did anything fun? That's cool. Dude. Yeah. Oh, I'm from Colombia. Where? From
It's like
oh, yeah.
I think the fact that
Where do you visit or?
I have friends he goes to I just don't forget. It's really
You like cars?
I haven't had it.
Okay.
One bottle. I have 992 TTS. Free, by the way. Thank you, NVIDIA. Thank you, Robinson and NVIDIA. No, I bought a bunch of like, as a lot of people did in COVID, I bought a bunch of random shit on Robinson, and I kept spinning things, and I just let it sit in NVIDIA for a little while, and then NVIDIA exploded, and I got a free car.
Unfortunately, it landed north.
Clarence back. Yeah, the number.
Okay, listen.
All right. 484 252.
Oh, you gotta be. No one?
I'm pretty sure.
All right, you got this one. See how these one go out.
That's you?
Let's just reroll. Yeah. Reroll.
Okay, next one. 484 258.
Oh my god.
258.
Oh, that's me too.
Reroll.
Alright, 484-256.
Oh!
255.
No, doesn't count.
This is not Price is Right.
I tested it, you can do
484 275.
Thank you very much. Can you verify? Can we verify?
Check
that one.
Thank you. Congratulations. Yeah, so keep your tickets, and if you're going to Hack Night tomorrow, we're gonna call another winner for.
Thanks, everybody.
You guys are coming out.